I never imagined that the most devastating betrayal of my life would come wrapped in birthday paper with a silver bow. As I sat in the cozy living room of the little Victorian house my grandmother left me surrounded by the twinkling lights I had strung up myself, I felt genuinely hopeful for the first time in months. The carrot cake I had baked using Grandma Margaret's recipe sat perfectly on the coffee table, pink candles waiting to be lit. My family was coming over at 3 o'clock, and Mom had mentioned they had something special planned for my 28th birthday. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the day we finally felt like a real family again. Before I continue with this story, please let me know where you are watching from, and do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Because what happened next will make you question how a family could be so cruel to someone they claim to love. 6 months earlier, we had buried Grandma Margaret on a cold February morning that felt like the end of everything good in my world. She was the only person who had ever loved me unconditionally, the only one who saw past my quiet nature and appreciated me for who I truly was. While my mother Linda had always favored my older siblings, and while my brother Derek and sister Amanda treated me like an afterthought, Grandma had been my safe harbor. The reading of her will had been a shock to everyone except me. She left her beautiful Victorian house on the outskirts of Portland to me, along with a letter that said I was the only one who truly understood what home meant. The house was not just a building to me. It was where I had spent countless afternoons learning to bake in the sunny kitchen with its vintage glass cabinets. It was where I had curled up in the second-floor reading nook, surrounded by her collection of classic novels. It was where she had taught me to tend the rose garden that bloomed brilliantly each spring. My family had not taken the news well. Derek, at 32, was a failed real estate speculator who owed money to half the contractors in Oregon. His get-rich-quick schemes had left him drowning in debt, and I could see the desperation in his eyes whenever he looked at the house. Amanda, my 30-year-old sister, was planning an elaborate wedding to her boyfriend Ryan and needed money for what she called the wedding of her dreams. The estimated value of Grandma's house could easily fund the kind of celebration she had been pinning to her Pinterest board for years. But it was my mother's reaction that hurt the most. Linda had always made it clear that she considered me the family disappointment. While Derek was the ambitious son and Amanda was the social butterfly, I was just quiet little Celia, who worked at the local library and preferred books to parties. When the lawyer announced that the house was mine, she had given me a look of such pure resentment that I felt it like a physical blow. The house itself was a testament to Grandma's love of beauty and history. Built in 1895, it featured original hardwood floors that creaked pleasantly when you walked across them. The front porch was wrapped with intricate gingerbread trim, and climbing roses framed the entrance. Inside, every room told a story. The kitchen still smelled faintly of cinnamon and vanilla from decades of baking. The living room had a stone fireplace where we had roasted marshmallows during winter storms. Upstairs, the bedroom windows looked out over the garden where Grandma had taught me the names of every flower. 3 weeks before my birthday, Derek had shown up unexpectedly on a Tuesday evening. I had been watering the roses when his beat-up pickup truck pulled into the driveway. He approached me with an unusually friendly smile and started talking about family financial planning and how we needed to optimize our assets. He pulled out a thick stack of papers and asked me to sign what he called routine paperwork to reorganize the property records. Something about his demeanor set off alarm bells in my mind. Derek had never shown interest in paperwork or organization before. His own financial records were a disaster of unpaid bills and failed investments. When I asked to have a lawyer review the documents first, his friendly mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. He quickly recovered, saying there was no rush, but I noticed how tightly he gripped the papers when he left. 2 weeks before my birthday, Amanda and Mom had come for what they called a sister visit. They brought takeout Chinese food and settled into the living room like they owned the place. The conversation started innocently enough with Amanda showing me pictures of wedding venues and dress options. But gradually the discussion shifted to what Amanda called maximizing family resources. Mom had been the one to broach the subject directly. "Sweetheart," she said in that patronizing tone I knew so well. "Your grandmother would want us to help each other. She always believed that family came first, and that means sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the greater good." She gestured around the living room, taking in the antique furniture and original architectural details. "This house is beautiful, but it is also a valuable asset. Amanda's wedding is important, and Derek is going through a difficult time financially." I had felt my chest tighten as I realized what they were suggesting. They wanted me to sell Grandma's house and split the money between them. When I explained that this was my home now that Grandma had specifically wanted me to have it, Amanda had laughed in that dismissive way that made me feel small. "Oh, Celia," she said, "you can live anywhere, but I can only have one perfect wedding, and Derek's business opportunities would not wait." The week before my birthday had brought an even stranger incident. I was coming home from work at the library when I noticed a man in a business suit taking photographs of my house. When I approached him and asked what he was doing, he claimed to be conducting a routine property assessment for the county. But when I called the county office the next day, they had no record of any assessment being ordered for my address. That night, I had lain awake in Grandma's old bedroom, staring at the ceiling and trying to piece together what was happening. The pattern of visits, the mysterious paperwork, and now strangers photographing my house. It felt like the walls were closing in, but I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. These were my family members after all. Surely they would not actually try to take away the one thing Grandma had left me. The morning of my birthday had dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect autumn day that made Portland look like a postcard. I had woken up early and spent the morning decorating the living room with string lights and putting together a small celebration. I made Grandma's carrot cake from memory, the same recipe she had taught me when I was 12 years old. The kitchen filled with the warm sense of cinnamon and nutmeg, bringing back memories of happier birthdays when she was still alive. I had set the dining room table with her good china, the delicate blue and white pattern she had inherited from her own mother. Fresh flowers from the garden created a cheerful centerpiece, and I had even found birthday candles in the kitchen drawer that still smelled faintly of last year's celebration. Looking around at my handiwork, I felt a flutter of genuine happiness. Maybe this birthday would mark a new beginning for my relationship with my family. The phone call from Amanda came at noon. Her voice sounded different, more formal than usual, but she assured me that everyone was excited about my special day. She mentioned again that they had prepared something unusual for me, something that would change everything about how I saw my place in the family. I took her words as a positive sign, thinking perhaps they had finally accepted that Grandma's house was rightfully mine. At 3:15 in the afternoon, I heard the sound of car doors slamming in my driveway. Looking out the front window, I saw Derek's pickup truck and Mom's sedan parked beside each other. But something felt wrong from the moment they approached the front door. Usually, family visits involved someone carrying flowers or a gift bag, but today everyone's hands were empty except for Mom, who clutched a small blue box with a silver ribbon. When I opened the door, their faces told a story that made my stomach drop. Derek would not meet my eyes, focusing instead on a point somewhere over my left shoulder. Amanda's usual bright smile looked forced and brittle. Mom's expression was unreadable, but there was something almost grim about the set of her mouth. Even Ryan, Amanda's fiancé, looked uncomfortable as he shuffled behind the others. "Happy birthday, sweetie," Mom said, but the words came out flat and rehearsed. There was none of the warmth I associated with birthday greetings, none of the genuine affection that should mark such occasions. Instead, it felt like they were actors who had forgotten their lines and were struggling to remember their motivation. We gathered in the living room, but nobody seemed interested in the cake I had made or the cheerful decorations I had hung. Derek sat stiffly in Grandma's old armchair, his knees bouncing nervously. Amanda perched on the edge of the couch, checking her phone repeatedly. The atmosphere was so tense I could practically feel it pressing against my skin. "So," Derek began, clearing his throat awkwardly, "Celia, We need to have a serious conversation. You are 28 now, old enough to understand complex family dynamics and financial realities. His voice had taken on a lecturing tone, as if he were explaining something to a child who might not grasp the full implications. Mom leaned forward and placed the blue box on the coffee table between us. "This gift represents a new chapter for our family," she said carefully. "We have put a lot of thought into how to handle the situation with this house, and we believe we have found a solution that benefits everyone." I stared at the box, my heart beginning to race. Something about the way she phrased her words made it sound less like a gift and more like a business transaction. The silver ribbon caught the afternoon light streaming through the windows, but instead of looking festive, it seemed ominous. "Go ahead," Amanda urged, gesturing toward the box. "Open it. We are all curious to see your reaction." There was something calculating in her eyes, a look I had seen before when she was about to deliver news she knew would upset me. With trembling fingers, I untied the ribbon and lifted the lid of the box. Inside, nestled in white tissue paper, was a folded legal document. I pulled it out and began to read, my eyes scanning the official letterhead and legal terminology. The words seemed to blur together at first, but gradually their meaning became clear. It was an eviction notice. A 30-day notice to vacate the premises, signed by a judge and bearing the official seal of the circuit court. My name was typed clearly at the top, along with the address of the house I was sitting in. The house my grandmother had left to me. The house that was supposed to be my sanctuary and my future. 30-day notice to vacate the premises. I read aloud, my voice barely above a whisper. By order of the circuit court, the occupant must remove all personal belongings and surrender possession of the property. The words felt surreal, like I was reading lines from someone else's nightmare. Derek shifted uncomfortably in his chair and began speaking in the tone of someone who had rehearsed this explanation many times. "Celia, we discovered some irregularities in Grandma's will. When elderly people make major decisions about property, sometimes those decisions can be challenged in court. We consulted with Ryan here." He gestured toward Amanda's fiancé, and he confirmed that we had grounds for a legal challenge. Ryan, who had been quiet until now, cleared his throat and spoke in his professional lawyer voice. "The will was written when your grandmother was quite elderly and may not have been entirely sound of mind. Additionally, there are laws about equal inheritance rights among family members. The court agreed that the property should be sold and the proceeds divided equally among all the grandchildren." I felt like I was watching this conversation happen to someone else. The people sitting in my living room looked like my family members, but they were saying things that made no sense. "This is my home," I managed to say, my voice growing stronger with each word. "Grandma left it to me specifically. She was completely sound of mind when she wrote that will." Amanda leaned forward with false sympathy painted across her features. "Oh, sweetheart, I know this is hard to understand. But think about it practically. You do not really need a whole house. You could rent a nice apartment somewhere, maybe closer to the library where you work. Meanwhile, Derek desperately needs money for his business, and Ryan and I need funds for our wedding. Grandma would want the family to help each other, right?" The cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. They had not just challenged the will, they had already won. The eviction notice was not a threat or a negotiating tactic. It was a done deal. They had been planning this for months, possibly since the day after Grandma's funeral, and they had waited until my birthday to deliver the news like it was some kind of twisted present. Mom reached across the table and patted my hand with fake gentleness. "Honey, do not think of this as losing something. Think of it as helping your family when we need you most. That is what love really means, making sacrifices for the people who matter most to you." But as I looked around at their faces, I realized that love had nothing to do with what was happening in my living room. Derek's eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had found a way to solve his financial problems at my expense. Amanda's expression was triumphant, like someone who had just secured funding for her dream wedding through clever manipulation. Even Mom, who had raised me and supposedly loved me, was looking at me like I was an obstacle to be overcome rather than a daughter to be protected. The house suddenly felt different around me. The cheerful decorations I had hung seemed to mock my naivety. The birthday cake sat untouched on the table, a symbol of the celebration that had turned into an ambush. Even the afternoon sunlight slanting through Grandma's lace curtains felt harsh and unforgiving. That night, after my family had left with satisfied smiles and empty promises to help me through this transition, I sat alone in the darkness of Grandma's bedroom and let myself fall apart completely. The eviction notice lay on the nightstand beside me, its official language a constant reminder that I had 30 days to lose everything that mattered to me. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen, grieving not just for the house, but for the family I thought I had. Around midnight, when the tears finally stopped, I found myself remembering something Grandma had said to me shortly before she died. We had been sitting in her garden watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold when she took my hand and spoke in that serious voice she used for important conversations. "Celia, my dear," she had said, "there will come a time when people try to take away what belongs to you. When that happens, remember that there is always a way to protect yourself. You just have to be smart enough to find it." At the time, I had assumed she was talking about general life advice, the kind of wisdom elderly people shared when they sensed their time was running short. But now, sitting in the darkness with her words echoing in my memory, I wondered if she had known exactly what my family was planning. Had she seen the greed in their eyes even then? Had she deliberately chosen her words to prepare me for this moment? I got up and began searching through her belongings, looking for anything that might help me understand the legal situation better. In the bottom drawer of her antique dresser, hidden beneath layers of silk scarves and vintage jewelry, I found a small wooden box I had never seen before. Inside were dozens of letters, emails printed on paper, and legal documents that painted a picture of careful preparation and deep suspicion. The first letter was from Grandma's lawyer, Thomas Harrison, dated just 3 months before her death. In it, he confirmed that her will was completely legal and ironclad, written with the full understanding of its implications, and witnessed by 3 independent parties. There was no ambiguity about her mental state, no question about her intentions. She had specifically wanted me to inherit the house, and she had taken every possible step to ensure that her wishes would be respected. But the most shocking discovery was a printed email thread between Derek and a real estate development company. The emails were dated 8 months before Grandma's death while she was still alive and living in the house. In these exchanges, Derek was discussing the potential sale of a Victorian property that would become available soon. He had even arranged for preliminary appraisals and discussed renovation plans that would maximize the resale value. They had been planning to steal my inheritance since before Grandma was even in the ground. The grief, the funeral, the family dinners where they expressed sympathy for my loss, it had all been an elaborate performance while they worked behind the scenes to take away the one thing she had left me. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I felt physically sick reading the evidence. The next morning, I called Thomas Harrison and arranged to meet with him at his office downtown. He was a distinguished man in his 70s, who had been practicing law for longer than I had been alive. When I showed him the eviction notice and explained what had happened, his face darkened with anger. "This is completely fraudulent," he said, examining the court documents with a practiced eye. "Your grandmother's will is absolutely valid, and I can prove it. But somehow your family has managed to get a judgment against you. That should have been impossible unless—" He trailed off, studying the signature on the court order more closely. "Unless what?" I prompted, though part of me already suspected the answer would make the situation even worse than I had imagined. "Unless someone with influence in the court system was involved in pushing this through," he finished grimly. "The judge who signed this order, Judge Martin Webb, he has a reputation for being flexible about legal precedents when the right people ask for favors. If your sister's fiancé has connections with him, That would explain how they managed to get a ruling that goes against established inheritance law. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place in a way that made me feel both furious and helpless. Ryan was not just Amanda's boyfriend and wedding planner. He was the key to their entire scheme. His legal knowledge had shown them how to challenge the will, and his professional connections had enabled them to get a corrupt ruling from a judge who owed him favors. Thomas assured me that we could fight the ruling in a higher court, but legal appeals took time and money that I did not have. Meanwhile, the eviction notice gave me less than a month to vacate the house. Even if we eventually won, I would lose months or years of living in the home Grandma had intended for me, and there was no guarantee that justice would ultimately prevail. As I walked back to my car after the meeting, a different kind of plan began forming in my mind. My family thought they had won because they had used legal manipulation and corrupt influence to steal my inheritance. They were celebrating their cleverness while planning to spend the money from selling my house on Derek's failed business ventures and Amanda's fairy tale wedding. But they had made one crucial mistake in their calculations. They assumed I would be a passive victim who would quietly accept their betrayal and disappear from their lives. They thought that sweet bookish Celia would never fight back or cause trouble for the family. They had no idea that quiet people often see and hear more than anyone realizes, and that patient people can be the most dangerous when they finally decide to act. I spent the next 2 months making elaborate preparations while pretending to comply with their demands. I found a small apartment across town and made a show of packing my belongings, playing the role of the defeated victim who had accepted her fate. When my family called to check on my transition, I told them what they wanted to hear about how difficult it was to leave the house, but how I understood their position. Meanwhile, I was conducting my own investigation. I dug deeper into Ryan's professional background and discovered that Judge Webb was not the only corrupt official in his network. There was a pattern of questionable rulings and suspicious case outcomes that stretched back several years. I also learned that the FBI had been quietly investigating judicial corruption in our district, and they were very interested in any evidence that might help their case. Most importantly, I learned that Amanda and Ryan's wedding was planned for the first Saturday in December at the prestigious Sentinel Hotel downtown. Amanda had been posting details about her dream wedding on social media for months, complete with photos of her dress, the menu, and the guest list that included several prominent local politicians and business leaders. It would be the kind of high-profile event where a public scandal would cause maximum damage to everyone involved. December arrived with the kind of cold rain that makes Portland winters feel endless, but I woke up on the morning of Amanda's wedding with a sense of purpose I had not felt in months. After weeks of careful planning and gathering evidence, today would be the day I finally fought back against the people who had stolen my inheritance and betrayed my trust. The Sentinel Hotel was decorated with thousands of white roses and crystal chandeliers that cast rainbows across the ornate ballroom. Amanda had spared no expense in creating the fairy tale wedding she had always dreamed of, funded in large part by the money from selling Grandma's house. As I took my seat in the third row, wearing the navy dress I had worn to Grandma's funeral, I felt grimly satisfied that their celebration was about to become something very different. Ryan stood at the altar looking confident and self-satisfied in his expensive tuxedo. Derek and Mom sat in the front row playing the roles of proud family members while secretly congratulating themselves on their successful scheme. The assembled guests included judges, lawyers, and city officials who had no idea they were about to witness the exposure of a corruption scandal that would end careers and send people to prison. The ceremony proceeded normally through the processional music and the reading of traditional vows. Amanda looked radiant in her designer wedding dress, the picture of a blushing bride who had gotten everything she ever wanted. The officiant was just beginning the exchange of rings when I stood up from my seat and cleared my throat loudly enough to be heard throughout the ballroom. "Excuse me," I said in a voice that carried clearly across the sudden silence. "I have something important that needs to be shared about the happy couple before they exchange vows." The reaction was immediate and electric. Amanda whirled around to stare at me, her face draining of color as she realized what was about to happen. Ryan's confident expression crumbled into panic, and I could see him frantically calculating whether he could somehow stop what was coming. Derek started to rise from his seat, but Mom grabbed his arm and pulled him back down, understanding instinctively that making a scene would only make things worse. "My name is Celia Morrison." I continued, my voice steady despite the adrenaline racing through my veins. "I am the bride's sister, and I have evidence that the groom has been involved in judicial corruption and fraud." I pulled out a folder containing copies of all the documents I had gathered over the past 2 months. Ryan used his connections with corrupt judges to help my family steal my inheritance, and I have proof of bribery and influence peddling that stretches back several years. The gasps and murmurs from the wedding guests created a buzz of shocked conversation that filled the ballroom. Several people were already pulling out their phones to record what was happening, understanding that they were witnessing something that would be major news in legal circles. Judge Webb, who had been sitting near the front as an honored guest, was quietly making his way toward the exit, but 2 men in dark suits moved to block his path. "Ladies and gentlemen," one of the suited men announced, showing his badge to the room, "I am Agent Martinez with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have been investigating judicial corruption in this district for the past year, and we have warrants for the arrest of Ryan Patrick Hoffman and Judge Martin Webb on charges of bribery, conspiracy, and abuse of office." What happened next felt like a scene from a movie rather than real life. Ryan tried to run but was tackled by federal agents before he reached the ballroom doors. Judge Webb was handcuffed near the gift table, still wearing his wedding guest corsage. Amanda collapsed into hysterical sobs as she realized that her dream wedding had become a public nightmare that would follow her for the rest of her life. The legal proceedings that followed moved quickly once the FBI had the evidence I provided. Ryan was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Judge Webb received an even longer sentence and was permanently disbarred. The ruling that had given my family control over Grandma's house was immediately overturned, and I was restored as the rightful owner of the property. But more satisfying than any legal victory was the look of stunned realization on my family's faces as they understood that quiet little Celia had outmaneuvered all of them. Derek's business opportunities evaporated when potential partners learned about his involvement in the fraud. Amanda's marriage was annulled, and her reputation in Portland social circles was permanently destroyed. Mom found herself ostracized by friends and neighbors who had read about the scandal in the newspapers. The months that followed were not easy, even though I had won. Cutting ties with toxic family members is painful, even when it is necessary, and there were nights when I felt the weight of being truly alone in the world. The house felt empty without the sound of other voices, and holidays became reminders of relationships that could never be repaired. But gradually, I began to build a different kind of life. The librarians I worked with became genuine friends who appreciated my quiet nature instead of dismissing it. I joined a community garden club where I met people who shared my love of growing things and creating beauty in the world. Slowly, I learned to trust again and to value relationships based on mutual respect rather than family obligation. Every morning when I water the roses in Grandma's garden, I remember her words about protecting what belongs to you. I think about how some gifts come disguised as betrayals, revealing the true character of people you thought you knew. The eviction notice my family gave me as a birthday present showed me exactly who they really were, and in the end, that knowledge was more valuable than any relationship built on lies. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had simply accepted their betrayal and quietly moved into that small apartment they wanted for me. I might have preserved some version of family harmony, but I would have lost my home, my inheritance, and most importantly, my self-respect. Instead, I learned that standing up for yourself is not selfish or cruel. It is necessary and right, even when the people you are fighting happen to share your DNA. The house is peaceful now, filled with the kind of quiet contentment that comes from knowing you fought for something and won. Grandma's rose garden blooms more beautifully each year, and the kitchen still smells like cinnamon and hope when I bake her carrot cake recipe. I have learned that family is not always about blood relationships. Sometimes it is about the people who choose to love and support you, and who would never dream of betraying your trust for money or personal gain. Have you ever had someone close to you betray your trust in a way that changed everything about how you saw relationships? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about how you dealt with family conflicts, or situations where you had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself. Please hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and do not forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming betrayal and finding strength you never knew you had. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that it is possible to fight back against people who try to take advantage of your kindness. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you have more power than you realize to protect what matters most to you. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the people who truly deserve your trust.